Welcome, everybody, to tonight's webinar on airport operations. My name is Gabrielle, and we're excited to have you with us. I'm going to hand it off to CFI Andrew and CFI Joe to take us through tonight's webinar.
All right. So tonight we're going to be focusing on some airport operations, more specifically airport operations that are more tailored to Princeton.
Yep.
So we do have some unique airport operations and little things, little differences.
Special to like just Princeton.
Right. That you probably wouldn't know unless you gave the airport a phone call or you trained out of here.
And we'll talk about some of those tonight. Before we go into that little introduction, I'm Andrew. I've been a flight instructor here since July 7th of last year, so almost a year now. Yeah. And Joe.
I am Joe. I've been a CFI here at Princeton since February of 2023. All right. So
before we go into some of the operations, we thought we'd give you a little bit of a background of kind of where Princeton Airport came from, right? So how did Princeton Airport start? How did this airport even come to be that we know today is Princeton Airport 39 November?
Right. So it started with Richard A. Newhouse. He was an aircraft designer back in the 1910s.
Mm-hmm.
So he lived over in Rocky Hill and he needed a field to work on his planes. Lo and behold, he found.
He had a farm field.
Yeah. So formerly known as Bulmer's Field.
Mm-hmm. So back then it was just a small grass strip essentially.
Right. But it wasn't actually considered like an airport until 1929.
Yes. It would have been more like
that's when it was technically founded.
Mm-hmm, I guess.
But he was here working on it.
Yeah. And working on his own planes too.
Right.
The other thing was, right, it was still a grass strip. So it was more kind of what you see today as like restricted or private places, private airports, right? So when people say, oh, I'm gonna make my farm field into a runway, a grass strip.
Yeah. I mean, back in 1911 though,
there was a lot of them.
Even we're all grass strips back then.
Even like Newark and JFK was all a tiny farm field at one point.
Yeah. Early days.
Yep.
So moving forward into the World War II era, the airport was being used in order to house B-10 bombers, DCs, and then in 1964 is when they made their biggest changes to the paved runways.
Mm-hmm. That was when we went from grass strip to pavement. And we got some pictures in the next page of the difference between them.
Then the next big change, 80s, Nierenberg family purchased the airport, and they are still in charge of it.
Owners today. So, like you said, it was founded by Richard A. Newhouse, formerly known as Bowman's Field, mainly founded as 39 November Princeton in 1929. Went from grass strip to a paved runway in 1964, and then we got a newer, longer runway in 2001. All right, so over here, now everyone sees the pictures, right? Yeah,
I'll take those. Yeah, we see them. We're good. We're good. We're good.
Yeah,
good job.
So if we look on the left, we can see this was the original first runway 28 and 10, right? So it was almost reversed because if we look at this modern picture from the runway that got paved in 2001, we can see the taxiway is on the opposite side, right? So the taxiway was originally on the other side, and once we got down to the end of 10, it actually crossed over the runway because all the hangars and everything were here.
So now, isn't our current taxiway, isn't that pretty much the remains of the old 2810? I heard someone say that once.
I've heard of that. I'm not 100% sure.
Yes.
Because I feel like it is.
Okay.
Gabby's got it.
I'm
right.
sure.
So I just moved it over a little bit, a little bigger.
So the taxiway turned into the runway, turned to the taxiway, and then the taxiway turned to the runway. And as you can see here, our runway back then was pretty much as wide as Solberg's, and it was also much smaller. There were also some power lines here, so you also had the buildings and then power lines coming right across, right on the other side of the road. So they had to be aware about that back in the day, because then that's why we have a displaced threshold. But now they moved the power lines back, which makes it easier. And with the improvement in 2001, we got an even longer runway. I don't know the original length of this one, but now we have up to 3,500 feet of runway, and it also got expanded. Was made wider. So we have a 75-foot wide runway, which is actually pretty big for a small airport like Princeton. That's pretty decent size. Because if you see Solberg, you see
Yeah, the average seems to be around like the 50.
yeah, 50 around there. But so we actually have a pretty wide runway here, and actually pretty decent 3,500-foot runway. Um, but you kind of see the similarities, right? Like the solar panels aren't there. It's pretty neat seeing the history and everything of how much things have changed. Like you don't see the hangar over here and how much it's changed over time.
Okay. Now that we talked about a little bit about the history, let's talk about the airport now.
Mhm.
All right. So there is Princeton as located on a VFR sectional map. So we're just going to kind of go through the basics of it. So we have the airport identifier, 39 November. After that, we have 128, which is our field elevation. So here at Princeton, normally we would set our altimeters to that 128 because we don't have a weather reporting surface.
We don't have an ASOS or AWOS or an ATIS.
Right. So if you were to, start your airplane up at another airport that did have a weather reporting service, like South Jersey Regional, for example, that's one of the things you would do there. You would pick up the weather, get the altimeter setting and set it to that rather than field elevation.
Yep, because they would tell you altimeter setting 29.99, or just like you would at Towered Airport, they tell you the winds, the information, except difference between Towered and a non-Towered, right? You don't have to report, I have this information, I have that information, right? And some may think, oh, if I'm on the ground, why don't I just get Trenton's ATIS? Well, you actually can't pick it up in the air. One thing you can do though is Trenton has a phone number on ForeFlight. You can pick it up, and it's the forget if it's the AWAS or the ASOS, but they have that, and you can give it a call, and they'll actually tell you all the information and what the winds are.
Right.
So you can call them before you go in the
I
air.
believe it is ASOS.
Yeah, I forget which one it is, off the top of my head. But you can actually call them before, or sometimes you go on ForeFlight. But when you call, it's much more up to date because that updates a little bit more frequently.
Right. Usually when I start up the plane, I like to at least read off the current METARs from Trenton.
Because you can kind of get a general idea. Is the wind blowing this way? Is the wind blowing that way?
All right. Not an exact science, but gives you an idea.
Yeah, just so you know. And you also get an altimeter setting too that you can change it to.
So, as Andrew stated before, we have a 3,499-foot runway, and it is 70 feet wide.
75.
75, I'm sorry. 75 feet wide. We do have a displaced threshold at the airport as well.
Those buildings.
Yeah. Just don't land on the arrows.
Yep.
All right.
We also have a right-hand pattern.
Ooh, this is the one that everyone loves.
This is very important, right? And there's actually a decent amount of airports around us that have it, like Robbinsville,
Flying W.
Old Bridge, Flying W, right? So this is important for Princeton, but also other airports, right? So take a look if it has a RP with the runway number, right? It's right-hand pattern for that runway. But now Princeton's a little bit different. We have a star next to it. What does the star mean?
What does the star mean? It means check the chart supplement.
Or the AFD
normally. So anytime you see a star on the sectional chart, it's your first big hint that there's something non-standard. Right patterns already aren't standard. And I think the way it's worded in the chart supplement, from what I was reading something about it online, a couple people that were expressing their opinions, they got a little bit confused on the way it's worded and believed that it was right pattern only for 10.
Because most other airports are like that.
Yeah, because the way it's worded in the chart supplement. And I think they thought it was right pattern for helicopters only for 10. It was something weird like that.
The way it's worded, kind of.
Yeah, but we just want you guys to be aware that right pattern is for helicopters only.
So if you're an airplane, whether it's 10, runway 28, you're going to be flying left-hand pattern, right? So, but that means when you're flying around, you hear helicopters in the pattern. You got to be aware when you're turning that base turn or that final turn, right? Could there be a helicopter in the way? Are they on the opposite pattern?
Right. I've actually seen people trying to exit the pattern on a base at altitude and almost go straight into a helicopter.
Because they're flying out there too.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're smaller, so they're a little bit harder to see.
Right. So, and also you got to be a little bit more aware on final approach. You have to look both ways,
Not
left and right.
Yeah. Making sure no one's coming in towards you.
Right. I mean, you should be doing that at any airport,
Yeah.
really.
Well, yeah. But more aware for helicopters too.
Right.
Then we also have our lighting frequency. So me and Joe have talked about this in previous webinars too.
Another thing that people love.
Yep. People are trying to click on a CTAF for the lights. It is not the same frequency. Right. Our frequency for the lighting is 123.05.
Which is also the same frequency as the Hudson River Corridor.
So as you click the mic over there, you're probably going to hear people saying, I'm at the lady, I'm at the clock, I'm at whatever waypoint they're at.
Yeah. But it's also a good way to verify you're on the right lighting frequency.
Yeah.
If you hear New York people talking,
you know that's the right frequency.
Yeah.
So you're going to either have to tune that in on your standby, switch over to comms 2. And we can see that's pilot controlled lighting because we have the star next to the L.
All right.
So at nighttime, just know you're going to have to swap over frequencies. Then we also have our CTAF here. So, that's 122.725. We know it's our common frequency, or CTAF, because there's a C next to it. Right. So we know that's the frequency we're going to talk to all the other pilots around us on.
Right.
And the one thing is, we're going to talk about a few other frequencies later. Make sure you're on the right frequency when you're making calls, right? We go to the practice area all the time. We go on that frequency, right? But then we come back sometimes and we totally forget to swap our frequency back to Princeton, right? Because it's only 123.5. It's not too many clicks away. But it's something that people will start talking on the practice area frequency, not realizing they're not on Princeton.
Right.
So always keep an eye on that.
And lastly, our preferred runway. It's not listed in the chart supplement, but it is just a bit of local knowledge. We do prefer runway 28 here.
When the winds are calm.
Right. Winds are calm, or if it's kind of a toss-up between 10 or 28, usually we'll just go with 28.
And the reason we do that, right? If there's a headwind on 10, we're not saying, oh, don't take 10, take 28. We're saying if it's the wind sock's very variable, maybe there's barely any wind blowing and the wind sock's saying 10, maybe a better option to take 28. The reason we say this is because there's buildings at the end of 10, right? And those buildings come up very fast.
Right.
The other thing is you got to think about options, right? Obviously, if you have a strong headwind on 10, pick 10 all day. But 28, you also have more options because you have fields in front of you. If you lose your engine on takeoff, right, you have a few more options. Otherwise, if you're on 10, right, you have to jump the buildings and go for the baseball fields in the back or anything.
Right. And those are just horrible.
Yep. And they should be included in your takeoff briefing, right? What happens if I lose my engine at this altitude, that altitude?
Right.
Right. Think about options, practicality, right? But keep an eye on that windsock, right? If the winds are calm or anything, we mainly favor 28 because the buildings are at the end. I'd rather be landing with those buildings and taking off right into them.
Right. Landmarks.
We got a few of them.
So I'm sure everybody knows the quarry, the big quarry, anyone that's flown here. One thing I see a lot of, especially with people, even experienced pilots that just haven't flown here much, tend to get a little bit of confusion between the quarry to the north and the quarry at the end of runway 28. And I mean, if your instructor's over there stressing you out and you're just exhausted, it can be a really quick, it can be really easy to confuse the two. The one is on a hill, the North Quarry. That's the biggest way to kind of identify it.
So if you hear people say at the quarry, no, maybe which one is it? If they say they're coming in from the north, right? Well, it's probably this quarry. If they say they're coming in from the southeast, it's most likely going to be this quarry.
Right. And I know sometimes us instructors will tell when someone asks where we are, we'll say, oh, I'm at the North Quarry.
Yep. Or I'm over the quarry on final.
Yeah. The quarry is going to be the one closest for the runway.
Yes.
And then the North Quarry is going to be up there by the practice area.
Yep.
The bubble.
which is also a closer view right here.
Right.
So this is the sports complex,
So
which I'll show you here.
I was gonna say, so when we make our call outs, you'll hear some people say they're at the bubble. Technically speaking, you should be using the name sports complex because that's how it is listed on the sectional chart. However, if you say bubble, I mean we're mostly gonna know where you are. Um, just don't get it confused with the Rutgers University bubble.
There's another one further up north because sometimes when you're coming back, this bubble is actually hidden by this mountain right here.
Right.
So you want to make sure you see two bubbles, and it's the one on the right hand side or the one near the mountain.
Right. I usually use that big hill,
Mm-hmm.
and then just look at the north side of it and you find it.
Yep, and you'll see it right there. Another thing is over here is more where the practice area is. And then not including this picture, but further south, we also have Princeton University, right? That's the big town right near the lake.
I have a huge stadium there.
Yeah, or it's actually, I think it's a stream. I don't know what it is.
Oh, Lake Carnegie.
Lake Carnegie. So it is a lake. Uh, but there's a big lake over there, right next to the town. And you can see the university. You can see the stadium right there. So you'll see people say, "Oh, I'm over the stadium."
Yeah.
Try not to get that confused with the sports complex or the bubble, right? Because the stadium is more of a whole stadium right at Princeton University. And that's where you'll hear him say over to university normally. It's also a great point to set you up for the 45 for the left down 128.
Right.
It kind of funnels that traffic in, right?
Yep, and it gives people a direct area to look in. Then if you say I'm 4 miles south, now
Well, we're at 4 miles south.
yeah, that's a lot of space to
We'll look for.
Right.
But now if I know, oh, you're over to university, I know kind of your distance, how long it's going to take you to come into land and enter the pattern if I'm about to turn crosswind, right? And I'm looking for you.
All right. So it's just helpful
Mhm.
to enunciate a little bit.
And one other thing is as you come right back from the practice area, you fly over to sports complex. If you see these two quarries, you can almost aim right for the middle of it, and it'll actually lead you right to Princeton. So as long as you're kind of maintaining in between those two, you're pretty much good. And sometimes there's also a diagonal road that I always like to follow here that takes me back. But right, those quarries, right, they're almost like follow these two spots right in between there. So it's an easy way to find how to get back to Princeton from the practice area.
Yeah, and you can also see all that construction going on.
Yeah, now you have the Whole Foods, I think it is, being built right next to us. So you see a big like brown and orange field that you can kind of aim for. It's much easier to see Princeton with it now.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a Whole Foods and an apartment complex.
Yeah, they're building a lot.
Poor people. All right. So over here we have a rough kind of outline of the practice area. So that's going to be to our northwest, roughly.
Mhm.
So a couple things about the practice area. You can transmit on 123.500. Also some other things I think are kind of worth noting about the practice area that as a student pilot might not be super aware of. We have glider activity in that area.
Mhm.
There's actually been one time where I was flying around and he had to be a good like 3 miles away. I was like, oh, there's a glider there.
Mhm.
They don't pop up. Some of them won't pop up on ADSB.
They don't have.
Right. So you do have to see and avoid a little bit.
Sometimes ATC will advise you if you're on flight filing about them.
Right. And sometimes if you're in like a practice area or doing maneuvers, you might want to pick up a flight follow.
Yeah, especially if you're near McGuire, right? Normally we like to practice in this area. Sometimes we'll go out to the east towards the beach.
Right. Weather doesn't always let us get out there.
Exactly. So sometimes we have to go out east, especially when you're out there, right? There is an alert area out there. So you want to be aware, maybe be talking to McGuire, tell them you're doing maneuvers in this general area so they understand what you're doing and they can move traffic around you as needed. Right, this is pretty much our whole practice area right out here. It goes all the way to Lake Nockamixon, to Round Valley Reservoir, Spruce Run. It's a big giant circle here.
Right. And you should also be aware of the elevation of the area as well, the other airports in the area, such as like Sky Manor, Solberg. So if you're going to be doing maneuvers, especially like ground reference maneuvers, you might want to take a couple miles away from those airports just so you're not directly in their traffic pattern at a low altitude.
You don't want to be doing steep turns right above an airport.
Yeah.
At 1,500 feet.
Nah.
Won't make a lot of friends that way.
Nah. Um, anything to add on that?
That's pretty much our general practice area. We're going to talk a little bit about the airspaces around it in the next slide too.
Cool. All right. So Princeton, we have a pretty unique airspace ecosystem.
It's
Sandwiched between two deltas. I mean, sorry,
two
two
Bravos.
Bravos, a Charlie, and a couple deltas.
So it's a great place to learn on the comps.
Yep. We have a little bit of every airspace.
Yep, we got it all, except for golf.
Right. Um, so the two biggest, most immediate airspaces that I think people need to be aware of when they're either training out of here or coming here for the first time is the New York Bravo, of course, which is to the northeast of us. They are not the most forgiving controllers.
Because they got so much traffic coming in, right? New York's a busy hub for, you got three of the busy major airports all congested in one area.
Right. Especially if you are going to be going east to practice maneuvers due to weather or whatever reason. You have to be aware that Shelf of the Bravo begins at 3,000 feet, that outermost ring. And Princeton is right in the Mode C Vale as well.
Mm-hmm.
On the other Trenton to our south. I would say if you're going to be planning a trip kind of south or like let's say you're going northeast Philly, you really want to try to plan conservatively with that airspace as well.
Because if it's a hot day and you're trying to go to Northeast Philly, right? And I take off 10, I go direct. Well, Trenton's right away. With the density out, if the density altitude's high, right? Am I gonna be able to climb above Trenton's airspace before I get to it?
Right. Especially if you have a tailwind.
Mm-hmm. And you're full fuel, maybe two passengers on board, right?
Yeah.
There's all things that play into factors there.
Because I've had a few people that have said, oh, I'll just climb above Trenton. It's only 10 miles away.
Mm-hmm.
So be super careful with that. Know how the aircraft performs, know the weather for that day.
Or fly around it.
Yeah.
So
usually I'll just fly right. It only adds on an extra 2 miles.
Yeah. So I'll come a little bit south, come around, and then go right to Northeast Philly, right? I'll aim right towards the what do you call it? The bend in the river over here, or towards Trenton or Robbinsville, and then turn in. Or you can come around the other way.
Personally, I think it's easier to do it that way too, because you just follow the river.
Yeah. But the other thing is now if you're climbing above Trenton, watch out for the Bravo.
Right. Especially, well, not just the Bravo too, but also when you're climbing above Trenton, make sure you're also picking up their altimeter setting. That is a huge part of that. If let's say you forgot to set your altimeter before you took off. Now, let's say the pressure changed overnight. Now you're reading it a little bit higher. So your actual indicated altitude will be different.
Yep. So if you're at 2008, I'm thinking, oh, I'm above. But really for them, the altimeter setting is different.
Cruising through at 2,000 feet.
Yeah, exactly.
Getting screamed at.
What are you doing? So right, that's why we always get altimeter setting when we're talking to approach controllers, because they want to make sure everyone's on the same altimeter setting and knows what altitude to be at.
Right. Yeah, be super careful with that. If I go over Trenton, I'll make sure I also have a second communication frequency where I can monitor them, just in case they're like, "What are you doing?"
Well, there's been times where I've been coming back from Northeast Philly. I'm like, oh, I'm over them at like 4,000 feet. But then I find out, oh, Frontier's taking off right here.
Right.
And now you see an Airbus coming right at you.
Yeah, because I had that happen too when I'm monitoring them, and they're like, "Hey, there's a Skyhawk X amount of miles out to the south," and like, I mean, that's clearly me.
Yep. Yeah, you can hear it and be like, "Oh, maybe I should get out of the way of a giant plane coming towards me,"
right,
or anything like that. That's confusing them if someone don't approach or anything.
Right. One big landmark I like to use if I'm going to keep me out of Trenton's airspace is that really tall, skinny, lighted tower. If you keep it on your right hand side, if you're going south.
Oh yes, near.
Yeah, it's like
along the
1,000 something feet.
Yes.
Yep. So you want to not just use believe we said this in our last webinar too. You don't want to just use ForeFlight as your like,
Yep.
this is going to keep me out of the airspace. It's a great aid for it, but you want to, use your panel mounted GPS as well as visual landmarks. Plan out your flight before you go over a delta.
And with that, I'll just bring this up because I remember one time I went flying down to Atlantic City on a cross country, and we came back. It was scattered. It was scattered, so the clouds obviously they had holes through them. But I think it was scattered at like 2000, I think it was.
Okay.
And we came back, and I'm looking at my sectional, and I'm seeing the scatter layer looking for holes. But now I know this tower goes up. I forget exactly how high it goes.
It's 2000.
No, the big tower out there.
1000.
Yeah, 1,048 feet. And I'm thinking, okay, I still have 1,000 feet between the bottom, the base of the clouds, and also that tower. But it was thinking about it, right? There's a hole. I can see a hole, but do I want to go through it because I know that tower is down there? Do I want to break through the clouds and go through that hole and find out, oh, the tower's right there, and now I got to turn away from it.
Right.
So if you're descending and you have high obstacles, scattered layer or anything, be aware of what obstacles are below, right? Because if that goes up 2,000 feet and the bases are 2,000, right? Do I want to descend until I know I have that in sight or I know I'm past it? That was just another little thing to add on.
But also, like you were saying, once you go too far south, not too far, but once you go south of Trenton, you also got Philadelphia's Bravo. Like if you're going northeast Philly, take that in consideration when coming home.
Yep.
We have McGuire, the whole plethora of.
And we also have
space.
Yeah, especially with the Charlie town. You literally have every single airspace in this small area. You have golf below 700 feet in some areas and 1,200 in other areas. You have your Echo above that, your Delta, your Charlie, your Bravo. The only one we're missing is Alpha.
Oh.
I mean, technically it's above us 18,000 feet, but you literally have every single airspace in one small congested area.
Yeah.
So that's why it's important to know what requirements you need to fly into these airspaces and where to locate because you want to go flying into them, not talking to anyone, not realizing.
All right.
And you can see this on the 430. Everything pops up if you press clear, where there's no number, right? It'll go 1, 2, 3, and then it'll go back to nothing. If you have nothing, it'll show you all the airspaces and everything. But now if you keep going 1, 2, 3, it'll start to get rid of some of the airspaces, some things. So if you're sitting there flying and you're like, oh, am I close to the airspace? Sometimes there's airspace alarms. You'll see a message will pop up and it'll say airspace 10 nautical miles away or anything like that. So maybe be a little bit aware about it. Because I know I've set some of the airspace alarms with the 430 where it gives you a message if you're getting close. But they give you a message pretty far out too. So don't be scared by it if it says airspace this, but then maybe, oh well, where's this airspace at? Let's take a look at it.
Cool. Now let's talk about contacting those airspaces.
So we talked about a few of them, right? There's New York, there's Allentown, there's Philly, and then there's McGuire.
Yeah. So the one thing I think is interesting is if you go on even in the chart supplement, I think it gives you 132.8 for the New York frequency.
Does it? I forget which one it gives you.
There's like a million New York frequencies.
Yeah. But normally, if you're going on a flight plan or anything, they'll tell you what frequency to go on.
Right. But as far as the initial call, because I've had a few students that are like, I called them on the frequency that's on the sectional and nobody talked to me, or they told me to get lost.
Yeah. New York does this a lot with VFR.
Right. So as of right now, it is subject to change. 128.8 seems to be
New York's.
Right. They seem to be okay talking to us on that.
Yeah.
For right now.
Depending if they're busy or
not.
Right. Or when you're doing other like instrument flight plans where you have to contact approach before you take off, we have all the numbers listed over here, right? So sometimes you're not able to talk to them on the ground because it doesn't reach. Right. So these are going to be all your numbers to call before if you have to contact them before you even take off.
Right. And that number is accurate on ForeFlight and the chart supplement, the phone number.
And they'll all pop up. So as we can see, New York approach, like I said, 128.8, or you can give this number a call. This one is especially important for Princeton because if you're on an IFR flight plan, this is the number you are going to call. Allentown, right? If you're near any airports surrounded by their approach, this is the frequency you're going to do, and this is the number you're going to call if you have to call them on the ground.
Right. And I mean, sometimes they'll hand you off one for Allentown. They'll give you a different frequency.
Yep.
But they're usually a little bit nicer about it. They're
Exactly.
not like, why are you calling me on this
Yeah.
frequency?
New York will be like, wait, what? Because they're so busy, they're overworked, right? Or Allentown. Philly's a little bit, but they're better than New York.
I like Philly.
Yeah, it all depends on the day, right? If they have a high workload and you're trying to request flight filing, they're gonna be like, I can't handle that right now, right?
Yeah.
They got a ton of traffic they got to work through, so they may just kind of push you off.
Yeah, but I've had good luck with 123.8.
They're
Usually
pretty
when I
good.
call them on a different frequency, they just hand me off to 1238.
And they'll tell you there.
And like I said, it's always subject to change.
Yep, they'll tell you what frequency to go on.
Right.
McGuire and Allentown are probably the best to learn on because they're the less congested frequencies.
Yeah. As soon as you get out of like this area, it just gets less and less congested.
Yes. And then eventually they put you on the center and you don't hear much. You hear occasional talking, but not much
Yeah.
because they cover such a wide area. All right, so like we were talking about before, contacting and canceling IFR clearances at Princeton, right? So like I said, we're going to be on with New York approach. So before I take off, I have to give this number a call. And they'll give me my clearance. They'll give me my craft acronyms. So everything I need for my route, what you guys will learn if you do your instrument rating, or if you're doing it, you'll know some of the craft acronyms. But you'll call this number, right? They'll tell you your route, everything else, cleared to take off, but you can't take off until you're cleared. Then when you come back to land and you go to cancel your IFR clearance, they give you two options. You can either A, cancel in the air if you are outside of the clouds, right? Because if you're still in the clouds, you don't want to cancel your IFR clearance because technically you're still flying in the clouds. You don't have visual sight on the ground. So let's say you cancel it and now you go miss on their approach. You're going to say, what happened? You cancel your IFR clearance. If you cancel in the clouds, well, that's an issue. You don't want to cancel in the clouds.
Right.
That's why you want to make sure if you have a visual, then you're good. Or the second option is you can cancel it on the ground with that phone number above. Because I think it's, from what I've experienced, I believe it's around 900, 800 feet where New York starts to come in broken. And there's a little bit of like, you can't hear them, right? Or anything going out. So that's why if you don't cancel in the air with them, just call the number when you get to the ground.
Right. And just to add to that, don't wait too long to call them. Most people have cell phones now and can cancel pretty much, after they taxi off.
Yep.
They're New York. They're not that patient.
And the reason being is, let's say, okay, so I'm flying on instrument flight plan, Joe's flying on instrument flight plan, right, into Princeton. Okay,
Right.
He's shooting the approach to go in, but now I'm right behind him. But now he's taking his time, shutting the plane down, right, taxiing back, having coffee before he calls.
And Andrew's just circling the airport.
And I'm sitting there holding because I technically can't land until he gives them a call and lets them know I'm on the ground and I'm good. So, right, if you're on an instrument flight plan, try to give them a call as soon as you taxi off. Don't delay because someone could be holding and they could be reaching their minimum fuel and they may have to land.
Right.
So there you got the two options when you come into land here.
All right. So this is also, I think, another big point that gets brought up a lot.
Oh yeah, NOTAMs.
Notices to airmen.
We get a lot of phone calls asking, what's that NOTAM saying Princeton's closed?
Right.
So what is that NOTAM?
Transient training aircraft. So aircrafts that belong to other flight schools. I believe it's TRG listed in the NOTAM. But yeah, if you were just coming here for, fuel or say hi to me and Andrew.
Looking to go walk to Princeton or anything.
Right. It's not a NOTAM for just regular flights. This is more so for the flight schools that come to congest the pattern.
And there's been times where there's possibly 10 planes in the pattern and we can barely get landings and you can barely even take off. Right. So that's why this NOTAM is put into place. It makes it.
And we don't have all the details on why the NOTAM is issued or how they went about publishing the NOTAM. That's something I've been asked a few times. Airport manager made some calls.
Yep, and it pretty much just relieves the congestion around the airport, making it easier for us to get landings in and out.
But the big point is that it is not a NOTAM that bars people from coming to
landing
visit
here
us.
regularly. So if you own your own plane, right? It's not like, oh, Princeton is closed, we can't go there. No, you can still land here because you're not a training aircraft, right? If you own your own aircraft and you're just transiting, that's totally fine. It's more
Right.
transient training aircraft, meaning aircraft coming from different airports coming to do training here.
Yeah.
Right. They can't come here. That's why that's noted down.
Right. Now, what's that second one?
Aircraft parking.
Oh yeah.
We see a lot of people come in with their own plane and they park in the flight school parking lot.
Yeah.
One, right, we have
It's usually on a Saturday.
yeah, we have a little bit separate parking for transient aircraft. One reason we have this is, right, would you want to park your $1 million plane right next to students learning or taxiing around? Right, so it keeps it a little bit separate from them. Make sure that we also have all our spots available for our training aircraft, because otherwise you have to walk all the way out near DC-3, making it much difficult for you for fueling purposes, for when we have to fuel the aircraft, right? Then it's a further drive. It's more work for all of us. So if you're bringing your own aircraft here, what do we park next to?
The DC-3 in that area. So the west ramp, they refer to it as.
Yep.
The NOTAM.
And if you don't know what it is,
it's in red.
Yeah.
But if you look for that DC-3, it's a real big airplane. There's no way you're gonna miss it unless it's not here for the day.
Yep.
And that's a very rare day.
Yeah, there's a few days where it's not here, but
right.
Not many.
At any other airport too, especially if you haven't on where to park, you should probably call the night before and ask, their preferred parking. And you can also call most airports on their Unicom or CTAF frequency and just ask them out of respect,
Where's your parking then? And do you have spots available? Sometimes, I think at some airports out actually show up in the AFD
Right.
for where transients should park, because they have special parking for that, right? Because sometimes they have parking spots assigned certain airplanes. Now someone comes back and you have their spot taken that they pay regularly for, right? People may be a little upset. But ours, if you're transient, try to park over near the DC-3, right? Because flight school planes, we have them all where they should be, right? All our planes have certain spots they go back into. So yeah.
Okay. So just some quick aircraft care tips. Start with the oil. Usually if it starts getting around the 5-quart mark, we'll just add in one full lovely bottle of oil.
Yep. Or if it's in between 5 and 6, I would like to add a little bit.
Yeah, usually about 5 or so.
Yeah.
We also have these little sippy cups at the front desk. Please, by all means, ask to use them. There's been a few times where people have tried to put oil in the plane without one, and we come out there and there's a big puddle of oil that dripped out of the cowling, and we're all sitting there like,
what's going on?
Yeah. So don't make more work for us.
Yes.
The oil in the plane.
Yep. And remember, don't just throw them in the back too. Try to throw out the actual container for the oil, because sometimes we find them sitting in the back of planes. We're building a stockpile.
I think somewhere there's a picture of me with like 20 bottles that
carried them all in.
Yeah. These are like currency around here, the sippy cups. They're the best.
They make life so much easier. It's like a funnel when you're pouring oil in.
Right. So also available at our front desk, we have window cleaner, and we have towels to clean the windshields off. Pre-flight bags. We have a nice. Pretty sure all of them.
Yellow or orange, yeah.
Yeah, all of our planes have these nice little yellow bags. With
what do we got in there?
We got our fuel quantity checker, the little dipstick.
Straw that we put into the fuel tank.
Oil sump cup, fuel sump cup, and pliers.
What do we need those for?
People with incredible strength. So that's part of the oil cap. So if you're ever having a really, really rough time getting that oil cap off, you can use a pair of pliers that we have in the back seat. Um, if you're going to other airports and not using the Princeton planes, these are things you would want to keep in your flight bag as well. Um, but we're nice enough to supply it with you.
Yep.
At schools that I've gone to, they don't have all this stuff
Yeah, you have to
available.
have your own.
Yeah. Um,
One important thing, especially with the dipsticks, you're going to see we have S models, R models, N models, M models, all different types of Cessna Skyhawks, right? So all of our S and R models, they're going to have 56-gallon tanks, right? So the dipsticks are going to be different between our S and our R models compared to our M and our N models. The reason being the M and N models only carry 40 gallons total of fuel. So if you try to use a dipstick for an S model in an R model, or an S model, sorry, in an N or M model, right? That's not going to be giving you the accurate number. So be aware, make sure you have the right dipstick, and they'll actually say it on the side. They'll say what type of plane it's for on most of them. They'll say a 40-gallon fuel tank or the 56-gallon fuel tanks. So make sure that it's the right one because sometimes they get mixed up. Right? If you're going across country, you say, "Oh, I have 20 gallons," when really you only have 10, right? That's something you want to be aware about. So always double verify, make sure, and you can just look at the numbers too, right? If you're flying in 3-8, make sure it's the 40 gallons. If it's 5-4 uniform, 3 Romeo Mike, 3-8 November, 298 Mike Charlie,
yeah, the R's and S's, they have the same fuel
make sure it's the
capacity.
56 one. So always verify, right? Because you want to make sure you're not measuring the wrong quantity of fuel.
Agreed. All right.
Fuel's most important thing. Always check that.
Cool. All right. Oh, so just reporting squawks in general. If you're a renter here or a student, don't be afraid to speak up. Tell them at front desk. Um, Usually, as long as we're free, we're more than happy to come out to the plant
Yeah.
and check out the discrepancy.
Because if you're on a solo flight and you got back and you're not too sure, or you start up the plane, find something, and you're like, well, should I take off with that? Don't be afraid. Shut the plane down. Grab a flight instructor, or go back to the front desk. Right? Ask them, is this okay? Why is it showing this? Why is it showing that? Maybe there's an explanation for it. Right? See what's going on. Someone who can kind of give you a better idea of what's going on with the plane. Is it safe to fly? Is it not? Does it need to be squawked? Right? Anything like that.
Yeah, at any airport,
Mhm.
any plane you fly, if you have any sort of concerns, you don't have to fly that plane.
Yep.
Um, Come grab someone
Yep.
and get
Talk.
some peace of mind, someone that might know a little
Exactly.
more than you.
Get a better understanding about it, right? That's what we're here for. You're learning more by doing that. You're
Right.
understanding a little bit more of the systems of the aircraft too and why some things are certain ways.
Good. Yep. All right. Fuel.
We fill it. So if you ever need fuel, you come to their front desk, let them know. They'll fill up your fuel tanks. Ideally, if you're going on a cross-country flight, our standard protocol is you should have full tanks. Right? Because if you're
We're
going further,
very close to full.
yeah, so we're very close to. Uh, Right, we want to make sure you have enough fuel to get to your destination and back, and also ample amount, whatever comes your way, right? It's always better to have more than not enough, but make sure you're also within your weight and balance limitations if you have a lot of passengers.
Right. Also for the nighttime fuelings, if you need fuel
Mhm.
after hours, I know I've had it happen where I had to switch planes
Mhm.
after the fuel truck closed up. We do have a self-serve fuel over here as well.
Yep.
For student pilots, if you use your credit card, you'll be reimbursed for that fuel.
Yes. Just put the receipt with the clipboard.
Right. That's the big one.
Because then they can see, all right, this much fuel was spent, and it'll probably be reflecting the receipt or however.
Yeah. And if you do forget to attach it to the clipboard,
Mhm.
but you still have it, you can also send an email to Princeton.
Yep, and they'll get that. They'll figure that out. Right? Because at nighttime after 5 o'clock right now, front desk isn't here, and if you need fuel for your flight, right, you're gonna need fuel. So we'll take care. They'll take care of that.
Winter care. Ooh, yeah.
So we just got through with all this.
But important to keep in the back of your mind.
Yep. So preheating. During the winter, you'll see a bunch of extension cords going out to the airplanes. When if you're the last one for the day and it's going to be cold out and those extension cords are out there, plug them in. It helps to keep the oil warm, making it easier for the person the next day to start up the aircraft. And also, they don't have to wait as long for that oil temperature to come into green because it's already keeping it warm. The other important thing is don't just unplug it and leave it next to the plane, especially if it's in the middle row. Unplug it, um, wind it up in a circle, right, and put it to the nearest junction box. Or if both wires to the junction box are right next to it, right, and you're the last one, bring it over to the grass. So when you're taxiing, you're not going over any cords or anything, right?
Right.
Because you don't want to be taxiing over an electrical cord, have the prop pull it up. So just be careful with that, right? Remember, if it's the last one out, right, and you're the last one putting the cord back, put it over in the grass, and then someone will grab it later tonight and plug it in.
Right. Also, for our future winter renters, be aware that usually we do have kind of a parking assignment flow for especially for winter because certain planes do have preheaters and certain don't. So you should check in with the front desk and see where they want the plane when you come back.
Because some planes have that plug, like Joe said, some others don't. So sometimes we put them in the hangars.
Right. Some we park them on the hills to get a little more sunlight, like the carbureted planes. We usually like them on the hill.
Just to heat them up a little bit. And also, if you do plug them in and you're saying, wait, where's this plug at? It's located right next to the oil dipstick. You may have to reach your hand in and grab it and then just plug in. It works just like plugging an extension cord in.
Yeah.
Once it's plugged in, it's good. You don't got to do anything else. Just leave that oil, the whole lid on the cowling open because that cord has to go through.
Yeah. And de-icing spray. So
don't fly with frost or ice on the plane.
Yeah, that's good. So our planes are not, our 172s are not equipped with a de-icing system.
What about pitot heat?
Close enough.
Tiny bit.
Yeah. So you do need to get a de-icing spray that we have over at the front desk. Try not to use the whole bottle on one wing.
But you want to make sure if you had to get frost off the wing, right? If you had to use a whole bottle, you probably shouldn't be flying in the morning. Right that's a decent amount of frost. Let it just burn off in the sun, right? You may have to wait half an hour before you go fly, but get your pre-flight done, right? Get your pre-flight, maybe get your flight plan set up.
Yeah, we should do the defrosting last because those things they do freeze back up.
Yeah,
especially when you spray the windshield, you'll see it frost over again.
Yeah. And maybe spray this like Joe said, spray it last. Right, and make sure all the leading edges of the wings are all sprayed off too. Make sure all the frost is off there. But ideally, well, actually, you never want to fly with any type of frost on your aircraft. It adds weight and it changes the aerodynamics of the aircraft.
Right.
Or ice.
Yes.
So wait for that sun to burn it off. And if there's a little bit, you can spray it off, but don't go flying if there's any frost on the aircraft.
Right. So we're going to talk a little bit about where we get our weather information for Princeton. So as we said earlier, we don't have our own actual weather reporting station. So no little radio call to say our altimeter setting, winds, clouds. But we like to kind of average it out based on the weather in the area. So the big one is going to be Trenton. That's the closest, biggest airport.
It's only like 5 miles away.
It's like 10-ish. Same thing.
Close.
It's very close.
Yeah, it's not 5. It'll be near the outer.
Yeah. So it's good to at least pick that weather frequency up on your way back to the airport and get an idea. But it's not like it's the almighty word. So conditions at the actual airport can be different than what Trenton is saying. And it happens quite frequently.
Yes. And Trenton Taft is it's been hit or miss recently.
They're trying their best. So there's also a weather station to the northeast of us at Somerset Airport. That's KSMQ. Usually
that one's pretty good.
Yeah.
But that's a little bit further away from Princeton now, too.
Right. I think that's like 12 miles.
Yeah.
So it might even be more than that.
I think it is.
So kind of have to look in between the lines there. Um, they don't have a TAF, but they do have a METAR,
Yep.
so you can kind of get an idea of what's going on.
Kind of.
Um, I also like to use McGuire sometimes,
Yeah.
just to keep an eye on like which way the weather is moving.
Because you kind of see, oh, is the clouds moving out towards the shore? Are they moving inland? Which way are they moving?
Right. But the main point, you'll hear a lot of people say, "Oh, we just use Trenton's weather for Princeton Airport," and you want to use multiple sources. You even at any airport, you should be using multiple sources to know what's going on and what's coming.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
This way, you know what you're flying into.
Right. However, we do have a brand spanking new windsock.
Windsock got replaced, I think, last week or 2 weeks ago. So it's bright and orange.
It's beautiful. It's the best windsock I've ever seen. Um, but it's important to know how to read that windsock and make your just go or no go decision before you take off. And I see every now and then people say, "Oh, Trenton's saying 5 knots," and then the windsock's like falling off, getting blown down the runway.
Yeah. It's like, well, no, not really.
All right. So every notch is going to be about 3 knots. You can see that nice little diagram we have there. Straight out is going to be 15 knots. So anything more than that, I mean, we're not going to see it there.
Yeah. So keep an eye on that windsock as you're driving up. See, is it right down the runway at 9 knots, or is it direct crosswind at 9 knots? Right? What's your limitations? Take a look as you're driving in. That's what I do. Every morning I come in, I take a look. That's the first thing I look at as I'm coming down the road, right? Where's the wind blowing? What's it doing? Student solo flight.
Speaking of wind, yeah.
One thing we want to make sure that all our students are doing before they come into solo flights is make sure your endorsements are current before solo flight, right? If you have any questions about this, ask your instructor, right? Talk to them. How long is my 90-day solo endorsement good for? Maybe write it down on the top or on the page right next to it, right? This expires on this date. This way, when you come in before your solo flight, you look at your student solo endorsement. Oh, 90 days. Oh, this day I'm still within currency. Right. Because sometimes we do have students that come in, well, their 90 days in current. So before any of your solo flights, check your endorsements. Right. Make sure you have them and are current with them.
Especially for the cross country
initial.
Mm-hmm. So any instructor can sign you off for a cross country as long as you already have the initial with an instructor you've flown with.
Yes.
That's stated in the regs.
Mm-hmm. Because the other one, we just look at your flight plan, make sure it's all good, the weather's good, and you're good to go.
Right. But for the initial cross country, and that's going to also have the cross country weather restrictions on.
Yeah, what your weather minimums are.
Right.
So that goes into checking the weather, right? Because now you don't have your flight instructor to rely on you, right? So take a look, right? Is the weather reporting bad? Maybe you shouldn't come fly. Right. Sometimes we have people who drive here, weather's bad, and we have to tell them no, and then you can't go flying that day, right? So save yourself the drive, right? Check the weather. Is it within your limitations? Is it within your minimums? Otherwise, you're just gonna come to the airport for us to tell us. Right? So be aware of that. Because when you go solo, your weather minimums are higher than where if you were flying with a flight instructor.
Right. More importantly, once let's say you're a student now and you're just not checking the weather, once you get your license, nobody's gonna stop you.
Yeah.
We will encourage you not to if we know,
you're going
student pilot or you just got your license and it's overcast 500.
Well, yeah. Probably shouldn't be going up.
No.
VFR at all. Because it's definitely below your VFR minimums.
But I know, especially other airports and if it's like, especially if it's like a self-checkout kind of thing, they might just leave the keys and you're on your own.
But you don't want to take that chance.
No. That's why you want to check the weather.
Yep. Because remember, at the end of the day,
get used to checking it and making the decision now.
So when you get your certificate, you know what it's going to be like.
Right. Don't just rely on instructors.
Yes.
Throughout your training.
In the beginning, it's good, right? We talk you through it, but then afterwards, we want to see you make these decisions. Should we cancel today? Should we keep it? Yeah. If you have any questions, talk to us about it, right? But after you get used to weather, we want to see you make those decisions, right? We may text you, what do you think about the weather? Do you think we should fly today? Yes or no? And it's up to you, right? At the end of the day, you're going to be PIC one day. If you say no, let's say the weather is good, it happens. It happens to us sometimes. I know I've canceled flights because I thought the weather was going to be bad, and it ended up being good. But I'd rather make a safe decision than um, it's come here and find out, oh, it's overcast 500, and now we can't fly, we can't do anything.
It's always better to be on the ground wishing you were flying than to be in the air wishing you were on the ground.
Exactly. So check the weather, right? Think is it a safe day to fly or not?
Yep.
Go
ahead. I didn't mean to cut you
No, you're good. And make sure you have that permission slip signed, right? We have these permission slips that you sign, a flight instructor has to sign. Make sure your weather is good before you go on any type of solo flight at Princeton.
Right. And that's just for us to know
who's in the air solo and making sure that someone's looking over the weather, making sure it's safe for them to conduct their flight.
Right. Rentals. So you got your license now and you haven't flown with us before. Usually for private pilots that trained, did all their training at, or not all, but they did their training truck ride out of Princeton. They get a little bit more of a pass.
Yep, you're good with that. We just fill out the sheet, and then because we've been flying with you, we know how you fly.
We have stuff on record already.
Yes.
So if you come to our airport and you are a renter with a private pilot's license already, we have this checkout sheet at the front desk. We also have it available on. Highly, highly, highly recommend filling it out before the checkout.
Saves you time and money.
Right. And gets you a little more flight time.
Yep. Exactly. Because then you get more time in the air. Because if you come in with this not filled out, we have to sit there on the ground and go through all of this information with you, meaning that you're paying us more to go over groundwork when you could be flying, it could be a shorter flight, spending less money.
Right.
Right. We look it over, make sure all your information is good, right? Goes a lot faster. So if you or any of your friends, right, do a checkout at Princeton, have them fill out the sheet before.
Right. And it's not like it's a super difficult sheet. It's just airplane basics, V speeds, some performance, system requirements, system
weight and balance,
performance. Yeah. And then we just do a short flight with you.
Yep. It's all at the bottom here.
Yep.
All we go over is power on and off stalls, recovery, steep turns, emergency procedures, engine failure, fire, takeoff and landings, and go around. That's it.
Not too bad.
But like we said, it saves you time and money if you fill this out before.
Right. All right. So now we got those rain days.
Flight simulator time.
Yep. The flight simulator at Princeton is located up in the instructor room, if you're familiar with Princeton's layout.
It's actually
behind that door.
Right over there.
So I think the simulator is great for especially for VOR tracking. And it is also FAA certified. So if you are trying to maintain instrument currency, those approaches you do count towards those 6 approaches.
There's 6 in the regulations. If you're instrument rated, you can kind of see that. Pilots Cafe puts that in pretty well. But the main point is you're able to get current in the simulator.
Right.
But don't just expect to come here to Princeton next day if you've never been here before and then hop in the simulator and say, oh yeah, I'm renting the sim.
Right.
Right. We want to make sure you have training on it first.
Right. It's almost like a checkout flight.
Yeah. It's just instead of a checkout flight, oh, do this maneuver, that maneuver. This is how the computer works, right? Our system is like connect your iPad this way. Right. Just familiarizing yourself with it, just like you would with an aircraft, right?
Yeah.
It's just understanding how to turn it on, how to start everything, how to move the aircraft around where you want to do those instrument approaches or anything else.
Right. It's just a little bit less intense because you're not going to, hopefully not going to hurt yourself or anybody else in the simulator. But we just want to make sure you're not going to break it.
Yeah. That's the main thing. And the nice part is you always got a pause button. So you can pause it and see what the plane's doing.
All right.
All right. Join our newsletter. So we have a newsletter that comes out every month. It normally has this webinar on it and everything, the topics it's going to be on, when it's going to be. Also, all the information about the airport, like recent student solos, check rides, aircraft for sale.
I believe they have a photo contest now as well.
Yes, there is a photo contest going on now. So you can always send your pictures into our email, which you'll actually see on the website when you click on it. So if you have any good photos or anything, you can send it and it can be posted in, I think, don't know if June's written yet. But maybe June or July if you have a good picture, right? See who gets the best picture. Um, so right, we have all this information. We'll go to the website actually. So you can see Princeton Airport, May 2024, right?
Right.
We have all the information. Here's our last webinar from Human Factors.
Aircraft sales.
Aircraft for sales. For sales.
Rental and student information for pricing.
Yep.
Everything's on.
Also, if you need a medical exam or anything, we also have our doctor. You click on this, it'll show you Google, where it'll have a Google where it shows you with the calendar, dates that you can book it or anything, landing, parking, fuel prices, all our social medias here, and then anything you need. So, the one thing is that, what the heck did we just go over? The checkout sheet is somewhere. Flight school rentals, I believe it is. Fleet and rentals. If you are coming in to do a checkout flight, we want you to do it before you come in, all you have to do, and it's the sheet right here, right? You can print it out, you can do it at home. We just want to have a physical copy though. If you bring one in, we can always print it out here, but that's because we have to put it on file with your record and everything, showing that we did that. But you can always come to our website. You can see about our history, right? All the people who have had their solos, anything like that.
Yeah.
So check it out sometime, and subscribe to our newsletter. You'll get updates every month, pretty much about what's going on at Princeton. All right. But any questions about anything we have tonight? All right. If not, we'll hand it back over to Gabby and we'll have her take over.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Joe. And thank you everyone for joining in. Is there anything anyone wanted to add? No? All right, cool. If you have ideas for future webinars, let us know. This one will be posted on our website and our YouTube channel. And then just remember, we'll have a barbecue June 1st, so feel free to stop by. And we'll see you all soon.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you for coming. Have a good one, guys.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.